Good to go?
1 second. Yes, we are live.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Alvise Armellini. I'm a journalist for the German press agency DPA in Rome, and I am your moderator today for this webinar called Borderline and Transplantation, Past and Present Challenges, which is part of the ongoing Festival of Diplomacy. This is a webinar which aims to show how the Italian National Transplant Center has built over the years an international network to facilitate the exchange of cells, tissues, and organs for transplantations. It is a network that works, that has allowed several life-saving operations, but it is a network that has developed in various ways through various international alliances and forms of cooperation. But the aim and the idea is to strengthen this network, to formalize forms of cooperation where they exist, or to create them where they do not exist yet, and to basically facilitate all the exchanges that take place under this network. There are a number of challenges that often come up within this field, issues related to border issues, to translating documentation, logistical challenges, issues to do with accommodation of patients and their families whenever they have to travel to do their life-saving operations. So we would like to share knowledge about this situation and highlight how we can do better. We can make it work more seamlessly and ultimately work for the aim of saving more lives more quickly, more efficiently, which is something that will be for the benefit of everybody. So with this in mind, I would like to give the floor to Massimo Cardillo, who is our first speaker. He is the director of the Italian National Transplant Center based in Rome. Good morning, Professor Cardillo. Are you?
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
We can hear you very well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we can see you now as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Professor, perhaps you would like to tell us a little bit more how the National Transplant Center has built this network, this cooperation concerning transplants.
Oh, yes. Please, first of all, let me thank the Festival of Diplomacy for this first participation of the National Transplant Center. And so to have the opportunity to discuss with diplomacy professionals of our international cooperational activities with the foreign country, with the complex donation and transplantation patterns all around Europe. As you can imagine, the transplant system is one of the most complex and articulated network in medicine, not only in Italy, but also the other country. There are a lot of professionals involved in this field, a lot of skills and specialties that are included in the system that create a network of interaction. So the transplant system is, I can say, a model of excellence with few parallels in the pattern of the healthcare. The architecture of the transplant system in Italy has two main levels, the institutional level and the operational level. The role of the National Transplant Center is fully integrated with the regional coordinating center in our countries. So we work together. We will see this also in the today discussion. And the main tasks of the National Transplant Center are in particular the monitoring of donation and transplant activity in the country, the monitoring of the waiting list through the informational system, the definition of guidelines and operational protocols, the allocation of organs, that's very important for the national programs, the definition of parameters for the auditing of the quality of the centers and the outcome of the transplant performed, and the promotion and the coordination of the relation with foreign institutions in this field. And this is possibly this last point that we will focus in today's meeting. This is a very sensitive issue, as you can imagine, because in the last year we have observed continuously increasing pressure of patients coming from foreign countries to be enrolled on the waiting list in Italy and in other countries with a good transplantation activity. So one of the main tasks for the National Transplant Center was to regulate this request, to regulate them in a way that they can be included inside the principle of Istanbul Declaration on Organ Trafficking. That's a very important point, because one of the most important principles of this declaration is that every country should make all the efforts to get self-sufficiency in organ procurement and transplantation, because no country all around the world has the possibility to guarantee transplant to every patient that need in the country, because there's a scarcity of organs procured in comparison with the number of patients awaiting on the list. So the National Transplant Center through the years set various bilateral agreements between Italy and other European countries to try to regulate this aspect, and we defined some preliminary conditions that are fixed for every foreign non-resident patient that could be evaluated for possible enrollment in Italy. Which are these conditions? The first is very important, that the referral should be done by a national competent authority. And we mean by this the Ministry of Health or a delegated body of the country that is requiring the enrollment of the patient. A declaration of non-availability of the therapy in the patient country of origin. A declaration of availability of post-transplant follow-up in the originating country in a way not to have a transplant that will have no success in the long term. The declaration of cost coverage for evaluation, transplantation, and subsequent health care, and the availability of the originating country to offer or return to Italy the organ retrieved from the cadaveric donor that are not utilized in the country. And these agreements also relates to the training, exchanging of expertise on the caring of patient awaiting a patient transplanted, on the caring of donors procured. So the main task for us when we are setting this agreement is to make the foreign country develop a system that is complete both in the donor procurement side and on the transplantation side. Currently, such agreements are in place with some European countries, such as Malta, Greece, Serbia, and some others are also under discussion with Bosnia and Romania. And we have also a cooperational agreement through a devoted portal which is named FIDUS, inside an intergovernmental organization, the South Alliance for Transplant, that allows systematic exchange of organs with many other countries such as France, Spain, Switzerland, and so on. As you can imagine, the COVID-19 pandemic had also a relevant effect not only on donation and transplantation activities all around Europe, both in the first wave and also in the present times. But the COVID-19 pandemic has also entailed new challenges in the international cooperation program. We have a lot of criticism in patient transportation, and especially on the side of bone marrow transplant. And I hope that this event could be the opportunity to discuss with the diplomacy professional on the way to face this criticism and possibly to solve them together. Going to the transplantation of hematopoietic stem cells, so bone marrow transplantation, that is the other kind of transplant that the National Transplant Center deals with. The role of our organization is fully defined also on the organizational point of view and the operational point of view, together with the other institutions of the network, such as the Italian Group for Bone Marrow Transplantation, and most of all, the Italian Registry of Bone Marrow. And together with these two institutions, we have coordinated the activity of bone marrow procurement and transplantation in the COVID-19 pandemic, facing a lot of criticism, and we will have the opportunity to discuss some special cases just today. Because in the bone marrow transplant, this is especially relevant because we have a lot of exchanges of donor material through European countries and not only European. So this activity was particularly influenced in the period of COVID-19 pandemic. Well, I thank you very much for your attention. I will close my introduction and hope this will be a very fruitful day for every participant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Cardillo. Perhaps if I could just ask you so that the participants know, have an idea about the scale of this, of what we're talking about. I understand that in Italy, we have about 4,000 transplants every year, but international transplants with international patients, I read that there were only 16 in 2019. Is that correct? Is that the correct scale?
Well, if you consider the transplant in non-resident patient, the numbers are quite low compared to the overall number of the transplant performance. We have about 10%, so a very higher number if you consider the transplant in patients that were born abroad but are resident in our country. So it is a number that is partially under discussion. So there are different situations. We have patients that are not resident in Italy, but they require access to the waiting list remaining in their country. And we have also patients that come to Italy and they have full residency and then they require transplantation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to move on to the next speaker, who is Nikolai Tasaki of the Italian Registry for Bone Marrow Donors based in Genoa.
Yeah.
Doctors, good morning.
Morning, everybody.
Welcome.
Okay.
So please tell us about your registry and your work. What do you do?
Okay. I am the director of the Italian Bone Marrow Donor Registry, which is a national institution which takes care of the procurement and the search of unrelated hematopoietic stem cell donors on behalf of Italian patients waiting for a bone marrow transplant, usually leukemia patients or very severe disease affected patients. And usually we are connected with at least 75 international registries which are doing the same in their country, and we exchange continuously stem cell products from and to Italy. Usually we export at least 100-150 per year stem cell collected from Italian donors and directed to international recipients, and vice versa. We import at least 700 of stem cell products from abroad to Italy. What happened in the very recent past? As you certainly know, in March we were severely affected by the COVID pandemic, and at the time Italy was the only European country severely affected. So what happened? That the Italian citizens were banned from other countries, and a lot of flights directed to and from Italy were cancelled. As we have to import and export stem cell, and usually we use trained couriers coming and going to and from Italy with this stem cell, we had a lot of problem to continue this activity, and first of all to guarantee the transplantation for our patients, but also for international recipients who had to receive the stem cell from Italy. So at that point, what we organized, we have to say that we found an exceptional collaboration and cooperation with our partners, with our international partners in other registries, but nevertheless it was really a challenge to find out a solution to exchange, to continue to import and export in few times this cell, because you can understand that this cell must be delivered as soon as possible after the collection to the recipient. First problem was that we couldn't use anymore Italian couriers abroad because they were banned, and they otherwise had to be submitted to a quarantine of 14 days. It was not possible to organize our import and export in this way. So with international partners, we decided to organize, learned to be very flexible and creative, and we, with other international partners, organized a new system to import and export cell based on handover. So for each import and export, we organize several handover depending on the trip and on the traveling of the stem cell. But in particular, we were very surprised what happened with the Poland country.
But the handovers take place exactly at the border between different countries?
It depends. It depends on the indication of the registry of the country. So, example given with Germany and with Great Britain, we organize 2 hubs in at the airport, where the health airport authority supervised the handover. So we had an hub in Heathrow in Great Britain and 1 hub in Frankfurt in Germany, and we vice versa organized 1 hub in Rome Fiumicino in Italy. But with Poland, the things were a little bit different because there were no anymore direct flight connection between Poland and Italy. So to import from Poland, and we usually import 1 product per week. So we have a high activity with this registry. We thought to organize in this way: 1 courier from Poland to Germany, the second one courier from Germany to Rome Fiumicino, the third one, Italian courier from Rome Fiumicino Airport to the transplant center, which was located in the north of Italy, so by car going to Italy. But we were very surprised when we received from the Polish colleagues the instruction where to perform the first handover. They sent us a map with geographic coordinates, saying that the date was exactly in this place, 52 degrees latitude north, 14 degrees longitude east. And this place corresponds to a bridge in Słubice. Słubice is a little village in Poland, divided through a bridge from Frankfurt on Oder. There is a river, and after the Yalta conference, this border was designed in order to divide the East Bloc from the West Bloc.
So it's like a spy story almost.
Yes, exactly. Along this bridge in the past, during the Cold War, were exchanged spies, and we exchanged stem cell. During the lockdown, a new border was established with new guard officer for the border, and they help us to assist our 2 couriers, one from Poland and the other one from Germany, to exchange the stem cells. And we continue in this way from March till the end of June, till when the regular, more or less, flights from Poland to Italy were again established. But I have to tell you that we are waiting for Polish colleagues' information, because probably in the next week we start again with this procedure, because Poland is going to be put in lockdown again. So probably all the flights will be cancelled. So what we learned from this lesson, first of all, to be flexible. And we gave an example to the other countries affected 1 month or 1 month and a half after our country, how to organize this shipment and delivery of the stem cell. The second point was that we found an exceptional collaboration with our colleagues working in the registries in the other country. But we had some difficulties in speaking with the embassy officer. I mean, they were very collaborative, but after we could explain them what we are, what we do, and what we need, because normally they do not know anything about the exchange of stem cell, tissue and organ exchange among countries. So it was difficult to find the right person in few time whom to speak to have assistance in the pertinent embassy. Both, I mean, Italian embassies in foreign country and vice versa, international embassy in Italy. So this is the lesson we learned.
So this is something that can be improved, certainly. I just wanted to ask you, how much slower is the procedure compared to normal times when you have to go through this extraordinary system that you have just explained?
We can say that normally we import from Europe, from European countries, stem cell in 7-8 hours, because normally our couriers use flights, normal flights. With the lockdown, this procedure took also 24 hours, because in some cases, I gave just you just an example, but we did the same from Austria through Italy, through the highway in Marrow Pass, or from Switzerland to Italy by car, not by flight. So it took also 24 hours. And yes, obviously it could be a problem for the safety of the cells and the quality of the cells, but we do not have any other solution. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, in these times, everybody has to be creative. Thank you very much, Dr. Saki. I think now it's time for our third speaker, who is Dr. Lucia Celesti from the Bambino Jazoo Children's Hospital in Rome, who will tell us a little bit about a few transplantation cases at the hospital, but also tell us how the Bambino Jazoo, which is a center of excellency for this kind of procedure, how the hospital is involved in this network of cooperation, and more generally what it does. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I am Lucia Celesti. I'm a pediatrician, and I am responsible of the accoglienza, sort of family services area in Bambino Jazoo Children's Hospital. Bambino Jazoo, just a few numbers to get an idea of what we do. Bambino Jazoo is a network of pediatric hospitals in Lazio region in Italy. Just some numbers. We have about 30,000 ordinary admissions each year, and more than 2 billion outpatient visits each year. 30% of whom are for patients, children, who are not resident in Lazio region. Lazio region, for non-Italian, is the region around Rome. Last year, we had 5,000 ordinary admission for non-Italian patients, and also 5,000 day hospital and day surgery for non-Italian patients, so a great number. About 1/2 of them comes from European country, mainly from Eastern Europe countries. The other 50% comes from the different continent of the planet, Asia, Northern and Southern America, and Africa. Just to have an idea of the number of pediatric transplants performed here in Bambino Jazoo, last year we had 26 kidney transplants, 15 heart transplants, 28 liver transplants, only for pediatrics, obviously, and about 180 bone marrow transplant. It is a great number, a big number, because we are talking about children. So it's not normal that the children is transplanted. Generally, there are congenital diseases and so on. How we are involved? We are involved in a formal and informal way, I would say, with the Centro Nazionale Trapianti, that is our light in this field. Informal communication are sometimes as important as formal communication. I don't want to speak particularly about COVID. I want to introduce you to a couple of case reports, just to have a practical idea of what can happen. So you imagine you are on Christmas Eve, some years ago. Paola Di Ciaccio, my friend in CNT, calls me, and the call is followed by a more formal communication by Centro Nazionale Trapianti. A child, Dimitrios, and I precise that I'm telling you just a happy ending stories. Dimitrios, a child Dimitrios, needs to be admitted to our hospital in emergency. Dimitrios is a 3 years old child, male. He was always in good health. He lives in Greece, in Athens, in Greece, in good health until November. In November, he had abdominal pain. He was admitted in Athens hospital, where he was diagnosed with a cardiac failure, and as a consequence of respiratory insufficiency, he was intubated and put in extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. So Christmas Eve, they asked us for immediate admission in our hospital in order to cardiac transplantation. The hospital quickly decided to send our ECMO team in Athens with a military aircraft to pick it up and bring him here. Lot of procedures were done with Italian authorities, and our ECMO team was ready to leave Bambino airport on the sunrise of Christmas. But we forgot to ask for the authorization of Greek authorities to land. We forgot, it was the first time, I mean, we forgot, we didn't ask for the authorization of Greek authorities to land in Athens. Do you imagine sunrise, Christmas? We have to go to save the life of this child, no authorization to land. The authorization of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Greece was done in a very short time. And I have always to thank them because without their help and collaboration, without the help and collaboration of the diplomatic channels, the small miracle that has been done would have never been done.
So did you get the authorization while the military aircraft was already in the air, or beforehand?
Yes. You have to know that the problem started on Christmas Eve, and the happy ending was on the morning of Christmas. But can also imagine that it was not easy. I mean, so that the challenge I put on your table, on the table of the diplomatics or the students that are that are hearing us, is that you have to be ready to get life-saving permissions quickly. This was just an example. May I give another example of another situation?
Sure, absolutely. So, but just perhaps, do you want to finish the happy ending? So,
the happy ending is that, yes, the heart transplant was performed, and Dimitrios is a perfect child now. I think he's in Rome now for one of his follow-up controls. Okay, everything went well. Thank you to the team job of all of us, doctors in Italy, doctors in Greece, and the diplomatic channels who take this possible.
And do I understand he got a special get well soon message from the First Lady of the United States?
Yes, now, you know, there are the elections in America, so I wouldn't say that. Yes, but the day when Melania, the First Lady, went here to visit Bambino Jazoo here in our hospital, and she met the Pope in the afternoon, she had a visit of the hospital, she met Dimitrios, and in the evening, the news of the heart arriving was given to us, and also to Melania, who was flying in what's the name of the aircraft of the president? Air Force One.
Air Force One, yes.
One. Okay. I have to say that was given at the same time on Air Force One and to Bambino Jazoo Hospital and Dimitrios. Yes, it was really a happy ending story. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
The second child is a female, Maria Eugenia. And here we're talking about not a heart transplant, but a liver transplant. This was a child of 7 months old with a biliary atresia. She was suffering from the birth, jaundice, poor growth, feeding difficulties. And in this case, the problem was she stayed a long time with us in Italy. The need for translation of clinical documents in order to obtain the S2 model. The S2 model is the model needed by hospital to be paid by another state. So for us, the most important thing, obviously, is saving life, but we also have to get the money to sustain all that. And the problem was that the consulate in Rome declared itself only responsible for the authentication of the clinical reports, not for the translations. The patients were a bit lost in this process, and of which the Greek authorities were often not aware. And I have always to say that our hospital is provided with a cultural mediation service that is active in our hospital. But not all the hospitals are provided with a cultural mediation services. So for this case, the problem, the challenge I put on your table, I put on the table of consulate embassies is that one of being able to support their citizens, both in the translation of clinical documents, clinical reports, that is absolutely necessary. For example, we have translations. We are authorized as doctor to write in Italian and in English, but we don't speak Greek or other different languages. And also to support their citizens for any need in cultural mediation. That is obviously very important to live in another countries. Do I have time for a third short example or not?
Yes, please.
Okay. Third one, very quickly. This is 11 years old child, Thomas, from Greece. And this child has a chronic renal failure. Was a child in peritoneal dialysis. He was affected by polycystic kidney. He had no living donor. He was supposed to have, but at the end of his story, he had no living donor. So that he had to stay, also this children has to stay for years, for a long time in Italy. and was discharged with the need to stay close to the hospital, stay here in Italy, because of the follow-up controls that he had to perform. In this case, the hospital had to take charge of a lot of management problems that would normally not be its responsibility. Responsibility of the hospital. Logistic problems, for example, the first accommodation, a house, a roof to live in, food, because the father of discharge lost his job in Greece. The mother had to stay here. The family has to stay here. And another big problem was that one of payment of drugs outside of the hospital, because the drugs, when you are inside the hospital, are done without fee from the hospital. But normally for Italian patients outside of the hospital, the drugs are provided by National Service. In this case, the problem was solved by the help of Centro Nazionale Trapianti and Greek authorities and Italian authorities also, with a strong collaboration. But the third and last challenge I put again on the table is that it is very important to think about and to know that a problem can be the help with all non-hospital needs as accommodation, food, and for the supply of non-hospital drugs for citizens of another country. All these problems are aggravated by COVID situation, but are present also in normal times.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your intervention. Very, very exhaustive and very interesting. We now move on to Dr. Giuseppe Feltrin, who is the transplantation coordinator in the Veneto region in the northeast of Italy. He will be talking to us about the work that the Veneto region does in terms of transplantations. I understand mainly with countries with patients from countries from Southeastern Europe, from the Balkans. And he will give us a few examples and some case histories. So, Dr. Feltrin, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Let me, first of all, thank Dr. Massimo Cardillo, who gave us this opportunity to represent the great work done by Veneto region in order to support foreign patients to be taken care of in our region. Veneto has a long-standing tradition, both in the field of transplantation. We have 10 transplant centers. We do both pediatric and adult organ transplantation of all organs. We are around 500 transplants per year. And then the long-standing tradition also in terms of reception of and welcome of foreign patients. So consider that we started with a program for extra UE patients in 2001, a program which is fully financed by a part of the national allotment which is destined to our region for healthcare services. From 2010 to this year, we have served over 700 patients coming from UE, as I said before. And just in this year, although with all these difficulties related to COVID-19 pandemic, we are still working with this program. And also for this year, this program was financed by our region with 500,000 euros. In the last 4 years, we have decided to exclude from this program transplant recipients because they have other channels to be supported. And this was just done with the idea to implement the fund in order to take care of a patient with non-transplant diseases. Well, as far as transplantation is concerned, just to give you some numbers, in the last 4 years, starting from January 2017, we have included in our waiting list 25 patients coming from, just give you an example, from Croatia, Greece, Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Srpska. Okay, and these patients were both adult and pediatric patients, and these patients were recipient of liver, kidney, pancreas, heart, and so of almost all kind of organs. We also have an agreement through the National Transplantation Center with Greece for lung, potential lung recipients. Talking about real life, as my colleagues have done, I just want to give you some examples, because the main complexity of having these patients inside with our waiting list comes from logistics. But logistics can be very different, and the complexity can be very different, and it's strongly related to the kind of organ that we are transplanting and to the clinical history of our patients. I know all of you are not doctors, but I think you can follow me in this example. Let's think about, for example, a kidney transplant recipient. This is a patient who usually is clinically stable at home, who can wait for the transplantation staying at home. And you know the substitute for kidney transplantation is the usage of dialysis. So this patient can remain at home. And when we have a call for him, we have a lot of facilities to call him. Why? Because the patient is stable, first, and because the organ kidney is permissive. In fact, you have to know that when we deal with kidney transplantation, we have what we call the ischemic time. And the ischemic time for kidney transplantation is of around a maximum of 12, 14 hours. What does it mean? It means that from a moment in which I harvest the kidney from my donor, I have 12 hours before starting the transplantation in my recipient. So if we imagine one of our recipients coming from Croatia, Serbia, whatever you want, he should have time enough to drive his own car, and in 7-8 hours by the call being here. But consider that this call is always done in the night. So we usually wake up our recipient in the heart of the night. And this makes a great difference. Just because if you think that coming here to Padova by car from whatever country, Croatia, Serbia, I told you, can take 7 hours, it's fully different if you do this travel. The recipient does this travel alone during summer with all the roads clean, and if he has to do the same trip in winter with no snow, wind, and whatsoever. In these cases, of course, even if we have some room, some time, we would like to have an institutional counterpart in order to support this patient to come here with an ambulance, a professional driver, not to run the risk of putting this patient into a rush, which can be harmful not only for himself, but also for the caregiver. So for all those who are accompanying him to this trip to make us our organ transplantation. Just to give you an example of the fact that this is reality, tonight I spent some hours at the phone trying to arrange a flight travel, which was a private flight travel for a potential recipient for a lung transplantation. This patient was coming from Calabria, so 1,000 kilometers from far from here, and we were able to call the patient and have the patient here in less than 4 hours. You understand that this is logistics, that this is what Dr. Cardillo has described before as our Italian network, but this is something that we need in general, not only for our national recipients. Of course, as I told you before, the more complex the clinical case is, the more the logistics gets complex. And the other example I want to give you is just from the heart. I am an heart surgeon also, and so I give you this example. When we deal with what we call life-saving organs, which are lung, heart, liver, we have fully different scenario with shorter times to have the patient here in our hospital when we call him, with shorter times to perform transplantation, and with the fact, which is absolutely unpredictable, that these patients can get unstable when they are on their waiting list at home. And so with the potential need, as you said from Lucia, as you heard from Lucia before, of having the need to go to the patient's home and bring the patient to the center for urgent transplantation. The example I want to give you is of a young guy, 7 years old, which had coming from Greece, that we listed for heart transplantation. When this all started, we knew we had to evaluate, to assess a patient, to understand if he was a good candidate for heart transplantation, and that this patient was stable at home. So just in December, the young baby came here with their mother, with the idea that in 10 days we would have understood if it was transplantable or not, and with the idea of sending him back home in order to wait for the call for transplantation. As soon as he came here, it was quite clear to us all that he was absolutely unstable. And so in some days, in less than 10 days, we assisted to a progressive escalation of our medical approach. So he started in a general ward, in a cardiology bed, and after 10 days, he was in an ICU bed, in an intensive care unit bed. And in less than 20 days, it was necessary to switch this patient from his heart to an artificial heart. And the patient has waited for the heart, and the heart arrived 1 year after. So during this period, the young baby has remained for all the time in our intensive care unit. And I think you can imagine, but if you can't, I tell you how complex it was then when we had an available donor for him to go to transplantation, and how many complications we have to face after transplantation for a patient who was so weak because of his very prolonged hospitalization. So it took us also after transplantation, he didn't go back home in 20 days as it usually happens with the normal cardiac transplant recipients. But I don't want to talk about, I've given you the clinical scenario, but just to give you this example, to tell you that it's not only a matter of economics, of reimbursement. Usually when we get a patient from abroad, we don't have problems concerning reimbursement. We have institutional channels, and this is never a problem. Usually it's not a problem. It's not only a clinical problem. This is our job. We know what to do when we do it, okay? But what I just show you this example to talk to you once again about the social burden of transplantation. Let's get back to the history of the patient, okay? After 10 days, the mom of this young baby calls her husband, who's still in Greece, is working in Greece with another young child. And she says, things are getting worse here. Please come here and support me. And we all know how it is important to rebuild the family integrity when we are dealing with these complex cases, because we all know of the devastating effects that these cases have within a family. So the father and the young guy left Greece and they came here, okay? And when they came here, they had no job. The father lost the job. The other brother didn't have the possibility to go to school. They had booked an hotel, but not an house, okay? And so we, together with our volunteers, had to take care of this call. And this is all the social sphere concerning an organ transplantation. Just to tell you that we had to try to support this family, and we did our best to do it, and we were successful in this. Just to tell you that when we think about transplantation, it is not only a matter of reimbursement of organs or whatsoever, but it's something more complex. It's something that can have a devastating power within a family. So if I should have a wish, if I could have a wish, once again, I think, and in this I agree with Lucia and her presentation before, we really need to have an institutional counterpart that takes into consideration the social burden of transplantation, which is something that goes absolutely beyond the clinical issue of transplantation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you, so when the patients who have to drive themselves to get a transplantation, do they have problems at the borders? Did you have greater problems during the lockdown period? Do you have any examples of that?
I thank you for this question. Well, usually we didn't have problems, especially with the kidney recipients. Now we have. Sometimes it happens just some days ago that we called a patient for transplantation, and we have issues because when he came to our border, of course, he had to face the restriction of his original countries and of our country. So in the heart of the night, once again, we had to prepare some very quick documents to unblock the patient and let the patient come to our hospital. But I believe that also this issue is something that should be a little bit more, let me say, institutionalized. I mean, we need to have a channel which is a very clear channel in the way that we don't miss time, because when we do this call, it's quite clear that we don't have time to lose. So sometimes it's difficult to face these issues. Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. And just to do the same as was done with Lucia Celesti, you can assure us that there was a happy ending in that heart transplant story.
There was, but it was a very, very long and complex history. There was.
Very much. And you confirm that Veneto mainly works with countries such as Greece, Serbia, sort of Balkans.
Yes, Greece, Croatia. Croatia, for example, mainly for pediatric kidney recipients. Kosovo, in one case, Bosnia, Republika Srpska of Bosnia and Herzegovina, mainly with these countries, and with this agreement with Greece. This is our main area. I think this is mainly due also to geographical reasons, because of course you can understand that for people coming from Croatia and Bosnia, it doesn't take so much time to get to Veneto through the border.
Okay, Dr. Feltrin, thank you very much. Now, we have our next speaker. If there's a slight change in the order of the speakers, I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Goran Aleksic, the Serbian ambassador to Italy. If the following speaker, who is Dr. Arnon Nagler, from the Chaim Sheba Medical Center in Israel, agrees to let Ambassador Aleksic speak before him, because I think he has an engagement and needs to speak earlier. So apologies for this change of schedule, and I give the floor to Ambassador Aleksic, if he's with us.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Hello. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello to everybody. Thank you for inviting me for this webinar. I'm of course not an expert. I'm not a medical doctor, but I could give you in a nutshell how Serbia and Italy are cooperating and what the embassy is doing in this field. I think that one of the most fruitful cooperations in the field of health is in the area of transplantation. We signed with Italy different agreements, starting from 2018. We signed first a protocol on cooperation in the field of donation and transplantation of the organs. Then in 2019, we signed a technical protocol. Then we had the visit of our Minister of Health here, and we met the people from the Italian National Transplantation Center. Then we had the honor to have the director of the center, Dr. Massimo Cardillo, in Belgrade, and I think that this cooperation is intense and fruitful. There are a lot of lives saved and families made happy due to this, I would say, efficient cooperation. I would like to just give you the perspective, the embassy perspective, how it goes, because one of your previous speakers mentioned difficult technical problems. So usually our hospital will contact the hospital. For example, we have an excellent cooperation with the hospital in Bergamo, Papa Giovanni XXIII. And so usually the hospitals get direct contact. After that, our hospital will contact the embassy, and the embassy will do its work. I mean, we then, due to this COVID crisis, and everything is more complicated. So we will contact Farnesina and tell who and why is coming. Then we will wait for the green light of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Health. Then in Belgrade, usually these young kids are accompanied with the mother or with the father. So we have to provide the tests that they are healthy, and after that we have to contact the authorities and make possible the landing. So we have to have the authorization for the landing. Usually this is, in our case, it is a governmental flight. It's a plane, small plane from the government of Serbia. So after getting this permission, then we will contact the border police, the Polizia di Frontiera. We had an excellent cooperation, for example, with the Polizia di Frontiera in Bergamo. So they will usually wait for this flight, a special flight. They will provide assistance. They will help to I would say to overcome these all necessary procedures in the airport, and they will or accompany, or they will give instructions for the drivers to where to go. So it is not easy. It is a thing that it has to be organized well. As a previous speaker mentioned, we don't have a unlimited period of time in these cases. So this is in a nutshell how it goes. We had the privilege to have the Italian delegation visiting Belgrade, speaking how to enhance the cooperation. Dr. Cardillo was there. He met with Professor Chulafic, who is our leading expert. We then had a cooperation even in this, try to help each other in this COVID crisis. We had a team of medical experts from Italy in Belgrade, sharing their knowledge and thoughts on how to help and how to prevent the disease. From Serbia, there was a a big shipment of medical equipment to Italy as a guest as a sign of friendship. So in a generally the cooperation of Serbia and Italy in this field is excellent. And one of my first tasks when I came here in Rome in 2017 was to give a helping hand in a transplantation, lung transplantation of a professor of medical faculty who came here, and he was operated in Italy. So I would like to say that the embassy here in Belgrade is very, how to say, engaged when we have this kind of cases, because there are a lot of steps to be done, technical steps to be done in order to have this smooth, I would say, transition from Belgrade or one of the towns in Serbia to Italy, or one of the excellent centers that are working here in Italy. So that would be in a nutshell, and that would be my view on this issue.
Pastor, thank you very much for your intervention. So we now go to Dr. Thank you. We now go to Dr. Nagle, who is Director of Hematology and Bone Marrow Transplantation at the Chaim Sheba Medical Center in Israel. And I understand that Dr. Nagle will be also showing some slides. So please, Dr.
So thank you for the kind thank you for the kind invitation to this important diplomacy festival. And I'm honored to be with all these prestigious Italian colleagues.
Doctor, if I can just, sorry to interrupt you, if you can just perhaps adjust your camera, because we cannot see you properly. Here, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
So I will talk about borderline and transplant past present challenge, and I'm from the Division of Hematology and Bone Marrow Transplantation and Cellular Therapy. I'm also Vice Chair of the Acute Leukemia Working Party of the ABMT. So if I can have the first slide, it's not moving. So just to tell you about our hospital, so we are for the second year in a row are elected as among the 10 best hospital according to the survey on the Newsweek, and the story in the right for the Hebrew, but we are ranked #1 in Israel. If we talk about bone marrow transplantation, everything starts with Donald Thomas, that is the pioneer of the transplant from Hutchinson in Seattle and received the Nobel Prize. And we have another Nobelist here, which is Professor Dosseur for the HLA. We can see here Georges Matte from France that started in the 50s after accidents, radiation accidents, the transplant. Van Rood from Holland that compete for the Nobel Prize for HLA. Robert Good for transplanting children in SCID, and Paul Tasaki for the HLA conference. So right from the beginning, you can see that the transplantation is all about cooperation between here European and American countries. And for this cooperation, I choose this leaflet of the bone marrow donor worldwide, claiming that BMT is unique in that international collaboration is essential to provide the best possible donor for every patient, as we heard in this diplomacy festival all morning. And indeed, there are few international, European, and American organizations to make this happen. This is the European bone marrow transplantation, the international bone marrow transplant, the American bone marrow transplantation, the national bone marrow program, the clinical international bone marrow transplantation, the Eurocode, so change of cord blood banks, and the Asia Pacific. So all we are a small village to help in cure and save the life of our patients. And all this chain of unrelated donors gives us the opportunity to find a donor for almost every patient that need, because transplant is the way to cure and prolong life of many of the patients. According to this publication in the New England Journal of Medicine, only a minorities that are listed here, it's about 12%. It's difficult to find. And all this session is also about these minorities. You know that the biggest registry in the world is focusing now to find donors, also to increase the possibility or chance to find the donor for the minorities as well. If we look on the activity of transplantation across Europe and over the Atlantic, we can see that most of the transplants are done from this donor registry, volunteers that have no gain for donating a bone marrow or peripheral blood for transplantation. You can see here the unrelated adult donor transplantation in the States and in the Europe. We can see here two types of family transplant. One is from sibling, HLA-matched sibling, and the other one that is increasing now, especially also in the COVID-19 time, is the half match of HLA between family donors, so 50% HLA match, mother, father, children, or brother, and then the unrelated cord blood that was less attractive last years, but have the advantage in the COVID-19 pandemic because this is a frozen unit that can reach you before the transplant or you have in your bank. And we heard from previous speakers the huge difficulties of shipping and the operation to shipping a donor in this time. And searching a donor, we will not go into it, but it's very complicated, and every transplant center have a donor searcher or position, and we are communicating on a daily basis with actually all the donor registries, and many times or in every country of the world. For instance, we are getting now shipment of a donor for the first time from Turkey. We get from India, and not just from a Western world country or the United States. And I'm happy that I have these slides because this story was detailed in very detailed by Professor Nikolai Tasaki in the second talk. But this is exactly the problem of the liver of the bone marrow graft or peripheral blood graft between Hamburg and the Polish border. You heard, and these are the countries in red that are blocked, the boundaries, and the way that the delivery by hand had to go through the bridge in order that this graft will manage to get to the patient and save his life. And one of my famous colleagues from the States tweet that getting the right product into the right patient from anywhere in the world, not just from the US to US. As a clinician, I think that it is a perfect example of something that happens routinely. I don't even think about it, that the product is not going to arrive on time. So this is our daily life, but now it's much more challenging. So we already discussed the type of transplant. This is the transplant that a patient gives to himself, the bone marrow, but this is only if he's in remission with no disease. This is a rare type of transplantation between twins, and we already talked about the unrelated, which can be mismatched, related cord blood and haploidentical transplant with the cord blood and haploidentical advantage as a source of graft in the COVID time, and when there is epidemic area and lockdown, so we can move to this graft in order to save the life of our patient. And this is because we are in Italian colleagues. This is from William Arcece, my good friend and colleague, for many years established the Rome network of 7 centers for transplantation. And just to see the option and to see that he is giving a pre-transplant therapy the same for all the patients, but only change, this is the same thing for brother and sister, unrelated cord blood transplant and haploidentical transplant. He just changed the immunosuppression post-transplantation. So all this network, now national network, are working with the same protocol, the same philosophy, and the same idea. So we can now analyze the data more efficiently. Number of transplants around the world. So we have basically about 50,000 transplants a year. Out of them, 35,000 are autologous and 15,000 allogeneic. So we are talking about big numbers. This is not 1-2 patients. This is a very large-scale operation. And most of these patients would be not with us and uncurable without transplantation. And we see here again the number with the unrelated transplant at the top. Also important that we are talking about patients that are not 18. We know that the COVID-19 is increasing chance in age and also increase with the severity and the results as the recovery go down. And we can see that about a third of our patients that we are transplanting today are above the age of 60. So in the risk group of the COVID-19, and also we have increased the number of patients that we are transplanting above the age of 70. So challenging time. We can do the transplant in this patient, and this is also very important for the COVID-19 by giving the patient less myeloablative less strong conditioning without radiation, and is very basing the transplant on immunotherapy and not heavy TBI or intense chemotherapy. And this is for a friend of Italian, very famous transplanter, Professor Bacigalupo, that need in Genoa, near Bambino Hospital now, previously in Milan, and he needs no introduction. And this is again very important in the COVID-19 time because we cannot give the patient myeloablative conditioning, because if we give myeloablative conditioning and the patient turn on COVID-19 positive a week or 2 weeks later, the chance that he will survive this event are very low. So with the reduced intensity conditioning, the patient hardly have a reduction in the count, or what we call pancytopenia. And this is our recommendation in the consensus papers that we wrote and are available how to transplant patients in the COVID-19 pandemic era. And by doing this, the transplanter could reduce by 50% the mortality and organ toxicity at transplantation. This is the work published in New England Journal of Medicine from Seattle. You can see that the 2 decades and in the most recent decade, by using the reduced intensity conditioning, the toxicity and mortality of transplant went down drastically. Now I will bring into the scene another very popular immunotherapy these days, which is the CAR T-cell. So this is immunotherapy, cellular immunotherapy. The CARs are genetically engineered fusion protein, and what the antigen recognition domain is driven from a monoclonal antibody, and then you have the signaling domain. And by doing this, the CAR T-cell can recognize the T-cells transduced with the CAR vector, can recognize and attack the tumor directly without HLA presentation. So we have now 2 commercial products that are approved, as you know, for CAR T-cell. One is the Chimeria, approved for children up to the age of 25 with acute lymphatic leukemia and for lymphoma patient. And another one is Yescarta from lymphoma patients. And we in Sheba have our academic CAR T-cells that is is produced in-house, and we don't need to ship the cell. And this is also very attractively in the COVID-19 time. You can see here the activity in Shiba according to the EBMT centers. This is when we started in 2016, our CAR academic trial in how it's registered. We have a program for both non-Hodgkin lymphoma and acute lymphatic leukemia. And we treated by now 150 patients, and this is a celebration, the leaflet of a celebration we did in September 2019 for our first in-house academic CAR T-cell therapy. And this also is a cooperation between many other countries, because we get patients from all over the world and from Italy as well. And this is also an alternative for transplantation at all, and especially in the COVID-19 time. So what are the challenging and what are the competition of transplant? This is adoptive cellular immunotherapy, and CAR T cells is leading this competition for the benefit of the patients. So I would conclude saying that allogeneic hematopoietic cell transplantation and adoptive cell-mediated immunotherapies are the ultimate example of international collaboration that is based on efficient logistical and organizational aspects that are especially challenging in the COVID-19 pandemic. And would like to thank you and take any question if need. Thank you.
Dr. Nagle, thank you very much. In fact, we do have one question from the audience. I'm not sure who it is addressed to, but please, Arman Mulic, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Massive thanks to all the panelists and to the moderator, Mr. Armelini, for a very fascinating and eye-opening discussion. My name is Arman Mulic, and I'm a global governance student at the University of Rome Tor Vergata from Bosnia and Herzegovina, actually. And my question will kind of follow the, let's say, the general picture, taking into consideration the various challenges and issues that all of the panelists have mentioned. So from tracing transplants from donor to recipient, and then this lack of cultural competence in our health systems that was mentioned by Ms. Celesti, I think. And then the whole coronavirus pandemic slowing down the system. I was just curious, because we have many medical professionals here today. I was just curious to hear their take on how the policymakers and governments can support this international cooperation and establish a more accessible global supply of tissues, cells, and organs in general. Yeah, thank you very much, and I hope I was clear.
Okay, is there one of the panelists who specifically wants to answer this? How policymakers?
I can try to answer this question, because as you can imagine, the European institutions such as European Committee and European Council have faced the question of products of human origin in front of the situation of the pandemic under several points of view. The first one is to assess measures to guarantee the exploitation of donation and transplantation activity in this era, to guarantee transplant in safety all around the European countries, and with the task to harmonize the measures in several European countries to face the pandemic. So in Italy especially, we have faced this aspect with the two different ways. The first one is to give indication to Italian region that donation and transplantation activity is an essential level of assistance. So it should be guaranteed even in the course of the pandemic. So hospitals have to identify solution to keep this activity alive, because as you can imagine, the phasing of the pandemic entails an effort of the intensive care units with the COVID positive patient, and this effort probably in some cases can decline the attention for procurement activity. So this is the first indication. The second is to foresee COVID-free pathway for patient on the waiting list and transplanted patient, because as you can imagine, the transplanted patient is a very frail patient because he is immunosuppressed, so is at more risk of infection, and in the case of infection, there is also an higher risk of mortality. So you have to prepare a defined pathway, a COVID-free pathway for those patients, and European authorities gave also indication for all the participant countries to give indication in that sense.
Okay, Professor. Thank you very much. I have another question from the audience. I cannot see the name fully, but it's a question from Tuishime Perside. Please.
Yes, thank you very much. I am Perside. I'm in the second year of Global Governance, Tor Vergata. And I'll start by saying thank you to all the institutions working together to provide not only medical facilities, but also other facilities for a comfortable environment for patients who need transplantation. I have a question for Dr. Lucia. You told us the numbers of children who needs transplantation, and they are high, of course. And considering the processes those kinds of patients have to go through for transplantation, they really take time, and some people might lose their lives on the way, especially for people who have to move from one country to another. So my question is, are there any specific reasons causing the increase of numbers of children who need transplantation? I need an answer as a person who is working in a medical field. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It is the truth. The problem we're facing is to cannot solve life-saving problems. One of the first question I put on the table is the necessity, the need for you who are young, we are students, to know very well that you have to take decision quickly. Because in these fields, to be able to take a quick decision can really save a life. Working in, I can make this example, working with transplants is quite similar to working in an emergency department. You have to choose, you have to be able to do a triage, I mean, to understand very quickly which are the red code patients and which kind of patients can wait, instead can wait. As the other speakers told better than me before me. You have to do this kind of choices. I have to say that with the strong cooperation of the National Transplant Health Center, I think we did not lose patients. Almost all our stories have a happy ending. And this is due not only, as I said before, to formal collaboration that are necessary and obviously we have to work on, but also on not formal communications that are very important. And I think that this is another thing that we have to take in mind. For you that you are young, do not limit your activity to what is formal, but try to do every day a step more. Think about the things that can happen, because maybe you will face what we faced on Christmas. Something new, something you don't know before, and the sensation of solving such a problem is something really great. I don't know if I answered it.
Thank you, Dr. Celesti. I think we have nearly run out of time, but I would like to give the floor back to Director Cardillo for some concluding remarks, and also ask him, if he can, to tackle a couple of questions that came through the web. I'm going to read them now. The first one is, would it be useful to create a network of professionals from international institutions, competent authorities, and diplomacy that would supervise, manage, and support all exchanging process involving both patients waiting for a transplant and tissue and cells? And the second question is, would it be possible to build up a dedicated border corridor for tissue and cells couriers, as well as dedicated procedures to facilitate patients traveling to the transplant country?
Okay. Thank you very much for these two important suggestions. I think that we had an overview of the complexity of the system, and I think that these two suggestions could be very helpful to have a step forward to face this criticism that we had in this special period, but more in general, to face the complex problem of international cooperation in the field of organ donation and transplant. I think I just took some notes of the items that were discussed, and I think that this has been an opportunity to have kind of sharing on that. We have talked about the logistics. Logistics is a very important challenge, because we are used to face the health problem when we speak about the patients requiring transplantation, but in most cases the health problem is not the most important one, as Dr. Feltrin said. We have seen what kind of relevance can have the social burden for the families of patients requiring access to transplant in a foreign country. I think that the constitution of an international group that include also the diplomacy personnel and professionals can help to face the social burden that families have to pass when requiring this therapy in a different country. The other very important issue is the involvement of competent authority. I think that we cannot forget that we cannot be alone to give an answer to the patient and the family if there is not a real involvement of the competent authority of the foreign country requiring the therapy. Because this is especially in the donation and transplantation field, because we have to remember that there is it is mandatory that every country all around the world try to reach the self-sufficiency in organ donation and transplant. So this is very important to be confirmed. So the competent authority should be motivated to face the transplantation demand of their own country to reach self-sufficiency. Italian transplant system is a system of excellence, so it is very attractive in this period for patients from other countries, but there is a need of regulation. So the constitution of an international group can help also in that sense. Last, I think that we have to face the number. As you said before, we are talking about 1% of the overall transplant activity that is dedicated to patients coming from other countries. But if we consider the number of patients that were born abroad and require transplantation being resident in Italy, the number reach about 15% of the overall activity. And in most of these cases, we are talking about patients that doesn't speak our language, that have difficulties to understand the medical indication. So I think, as Lucia said before, that it's very important that our hospitals are organized to face these problems, to have cultural mediators, to have relation with the patient and their families that have really to understand what the indications are and what they have to do to keep the transplant performing for a long period of time. So we have a lot of challenges. I think that the today event has been a very important opportunity to start some new initiatives, and I hope and I am really available to start something new on this field with the diplomacy personnel and professionals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. And with that, I think we have come to the end of our webinar. So thank you, everybody, for participating, and have a good day.
Oh, last, please let me thank my colleague that organized this event. So I will thank Margherita Gentile and Paola Di Ciaccio and Claudia Carella and all the personnel in the National Transplant Center that helped organizing this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Massimo, Paola, Margherita, and Alvise.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.